For over 450 years, Goa was a Portuguese colony, an ancient trading port with a culture you couldn't find anywhere else in India, a unique fusion of East and West. This distinction made it the perfect sanctuary when, in the mid-1960s, a new kind of traveler began to arrive. They came overland from Europe and America, a stream of disillusioned youth leaving the consumer-driven West to find something real. They were called hippies, and in Goa's laid-back beaches, cheap living and spiritual atmosphere, they found their paradise. Before the massive festivals, before DJs became global superstars, and long before electronic music was a multi-billion-dollar industry, there was this place, a handful of beaches on India's west coast that became the end of the line for a generation of dreamers. This is the unlikely story of how a tiny sun-drenched corner of the world accidentally kicked off a global music revolution. Those early days were the stuff of legend. Life was beautifully simple, lived out in beach shacks and small tight-knit communities. The original soundtrack to this life wasn't electronic at all. It was acoustic guitars, hand drums, and sing-alongs at the beaches. The air was filled with psychedelic rock, The Doors, Pink Floyd, The Grateful Dead, anthems for the counterculture they were building. These gatherings, especially the famous full moon parties, were more than just parties. They were communal rituals, a celebration of shared consciousness and a rejection of the material world. A central figure was an American known as Eight Finger Eddie, who helped anchor the community in Anjuna. He co-founded the now famous Anjuna flea market, which began as a way for travelers to barter goods to fund their stay, but quickly grew into a pillar of this new utopia. For a while it seemed this paradise, fueled by peace, love and hashish, might just last forever. It was its own self-contained world, but no paradise is an island, and the sounds of the outside world were starting to arrive, carried on cassette tapes. The first whispers of change came in the late 70s and early 80s. Travelers and pioneering DJs like Fred Disco and DJ Laurent started bringing tapes of strange new electronic music from Europe. The industrial sounds of bands like Kraftwerk and New Wave began to mix with the psych rock that had defined the scene for years. There was also a practical reason for the shift. In Goa's humid, salty air, vinyl records would warp and guitar strings would rust. But tape decks and later DIT players were resilient. They could play for hours, perfect for the dusk till dawn parties that were becoming the main event. DJs started crafting their own extended edits, looping tracks to create marathon soundscapes that could guide a dancer through an entire night. Slowly but surely, stacks of speakers in the jungle began to replace the acoustic campfires. But this wasn't just about technology. A new philosophy was taking shape, driven by the man who would become the godfather of the movement, Goa Gil. An American-born sadhu or holy man, Gil had left the San Francisco scene in 1969 and immersed himself in Indian spirituality. He saw these parties not as mere entertainment but as modern tribal rituals. For Gil, dancing was a form of active meditation, a way to connect with the divine. He believed the right music could be a tool for spiritual awakening. This blend of Western psychedelic culture and Eastern mysticism became the scene's spiritual engine. The music morphed into something else entirely. It was no longer about playing individual songs, it was about creating a continuous hypnotic journey. DJs wove the drones of Indian classical music with the driving pulse of European electronic body music and the trippy textures of acid house. They twisted sounds, layering synths and drum machines to create something brand new. By the early 1990s, the sound had a name, defined by rolling bass lines, complex layers of acidic synths, and a feeling that it was constantly evolving. This wasn't techno and it wasn't house, this was Goa Trance. What happened next was inevitable. The thousands of travelers who experienced this magic on the beaches of Anjuna and Vagator didn't just go home with tans, they went home with backpacks full of tapes. They carried the sound of Goa Trance back with them to Israel, the UK, Germany and Japan. Goa-style parties began popping up across the globe at festivals like VOOV in Germany and influential London clubs like Megatropolis. The sound had found a worldwide audience. In 1993, the landmark album Project 2 Trance was released, featuring pioneers like Simon Posford. A year later, superstar DJ Paul Oakenfold unleashed his legendary Goa mix on BBC Radio 1, broadcasting the sound to millions and cementing its place on the global map. The mid-90s were the golden age. Goa Trance was booming and an entire industry grew around it. But this global fame came at a cost. The sound, once experimental and free-flowing, grew harder, faster and more intense. The melodic spiritual layers of classic Goa Trance were stripped away, evolving into a new, more aggressive style known as Psytrance. By the late 90s, the term Goa Trance was already starting to sound historic. As Psytrance, the genre it birthed, fractured into dozens of subgenres. The revolution that started on a remote Indian beach had gone viral. Today, the Goa of the 1970s is gone. The quiet fishing villages are now bustling tourist towns. The small, free jungle parties have largely been replaced by commercial festivals, noise curfews, and regulations. For many of the original pioneers, the influx of big money tourism broke the spell. But the spirit of Goa is harder to kill. While massive EDM festivals like Sunburn now dominate the landscape, you can still find the scene's original heartbeat. Iconic venues like Hilltop and Shiva Valley in Anjuna still throw parties that carry the torch, where the music runs from sunset to sunrise, and the global psytrance scene in all its forms owes its very existence to those early experiments in the jungle. The ultimate legacy of Goa isn't just a music genre, it's the radical idea that a dance floor could be a sacred space. It was the fusion of ancient ritual with futuristic sound, a blend of hedonism and spirituality. It proved that a small community of dreamers could, with sheer creativity, birth a culture that would change music forever. Goa isn't just a place on a map, it's an idea, a state of mind that lives on in every thumping bass line that tries to do more than just make you dance, but take you somewhere else entirely. But what do you think? Is the free-spirited soul of that original hippie paradise still alive in Goa today, or have the mega festivals and tourism washed it away for good? Let us know in the comments. From acoustic guitars around a fire to a global electronic movement, the story of Goa is a wild ride. It's a bittersweet tale of how a search for paradise created a revolutionary sound, and how that sound, once set free, took on a life of its own. The names and styles have changed, but the mission, to find connection, euphoria, and a deeper meaning through music, remains the timeless thumping heart of the Goa Trance phenomenon.